Nobody walked outside during the heat hours on Kesari 7. The twin suns turned the sand into glass and the air into fire. Only fools and the dying went out when the shadows disappeared. Danny Reeves was not a fool, but he had stopped caring about comfort a long time ago. He sat on an overturned crate near the water station, watching the empty streets of the trading outpost. His shirt was soaked with sweat. His water ration for the day sat in a metal cup beside him, warm and precious. Around him, the buildings creaked and groaned as they expanded in the heat. Danny had been on Kesari 7 for 3 months now. Before that, he had been a cargo hauler with his own ship. Then the debts caught up with him and the ship was gone. Now he swept floors and carried boxes for anyone who would pay him enough to eat. He was thinking about nothing in particular when he saw it. Something moved near the outer wall of the outpost. At first, Danny thought it was a pile of old fabric blown by the wind. Then the pile shifted and he saw feathers, then scales, then a beak that could have bitten through metal. The creature was huge, maybe 15 feet from head to tail. Its body was covered in golden feathers that had turned brown with dust and neglect. Where the feathers ended, dark blue scales began. It had 4 legs that ended in claws and 2 wings that dragged on the ground behind it, torn and useless. Danny had never seen anything like it. He watched as the creature tried to lift its head and failed. It was dying. That much was obvious. Dying of thirst, dying of heat, dying of whatever had torn its wings and left it to wander until it collapsed. Other beings passed by during the next hour. A Toraki merchant glanced at the creature and walked faster. 2 Moravi traders made hand signs that Danny recognized as protection against evil. A group of miners changed their path entirely to avoid going near it. Nobody helped. Danny looked at his water ration. It was all he would get until tomorrow. If he gave it away, he would spend the rest of the day with a dry throat and a pounding headache. He picked up the cup and walked toward the creature. The sand burned through his boots as he crossed the open ground. The creature did not move as he approached. Up close, Danny could see the ribs pressing against its skin. He could see the cracks in its scales where dehydration had set in. He could see the film forming over its golden eyes. Danny knelt down and poured his water into a shallow depression in the sand, right in front of the creature's beak. "Here," he said quietly, "drink." The creature's eye opened. It was gold, bright gold, and there was intelligence in it. Ancient, tired intelligence that seemed to look right through Danny and into something beyond. The creature did not drink, it just watched him. "Go on," Danny said. "It is not much, but it is clean." A voice spoke in Danny's mind. Not words exactly, but meaning that formed into words. "Why?" Danny blinked. He had heard of species that could do this, but he had never experienced it himself. "Because you are thirsty," he said out loud, "and I have water." The creature stared at him for a long moment. Then slowly it lowered its beak and drank. Danny sat back on his heels and watched. The creature finished the water in 3 swallows. It was not enough, not nearly enough, but some of the tension left its body. Its breathing became a little easier. "I will bring more tomorrow," Danny said. "Rest now." He stood to leave, but a hand grabbed his arm and pulled him back. He turned to find an elderly Moravi woman staring at him with wide eyes. Her fur was gray with age, and her hands were shaking. "What have you done?" she whispered. "Do you know what that is?" Danny looked back at the creature. "No, what is it?" "That is a Kelvari," the old woman's voice cracked. "They were supposed to be gone, all of them. 10,000 years ago, we made sure they were all gone." "Why?" The old woman's grip tightened. "Because they burned the first empire. They destroyed 1,000 worlds. They killed more beings than any war in history." She pulled Danny closer. "And you just gave one water." Danny looked at the creature again. It was still watching him. There was no malice in its eyes, no hunger for destruction. There was only exhaustion and something that might have been surprise. "It was thirsty," Danny said. The old woman stared at him like he had lost his mind. Around them, other beings were starting to gather. Word was spreading. Danny could see fear on their faces, anger on others. Someone was already running toward the administrator's office. The creature that called itself a Kelvari did not move. It just kept watching Danny with those ancient golden eyes, as if trying to understand something it had never seen before. Danny did not know what the creature had done 10,000 years ago. He did not know what it was capable of doing now. He only knew that it had been dying and he had helped. That was enough for today. Tomorrow he would figure out the rest. The creature drank for the first time in what might have been weeks. The sound was loud in the silence of the outpost. Every being within sight had stopped moving to watch. Danny stood nearby, arms crossed, saying nothing. By the time darkness fell, the entire outpost knew what had happened. The human had given water to a Kelvari. The monsters from the old stories were real, and one of them was lying by the outer wall, alive. The elderly Moravi woman was named Scylla. She found Danny in the food hall that night and sat across from him without asking permission. "You need to understand what you have done," she said. Danny chewed his food slowly. "Tell me." Scylla leaned forward. 10,000 years ago, the Kelvari ruled the galaxy. They were not conquerors in the normal sense. They were gods, or close enough. They could tear ships apart with their minds. They could burn atmospheres with a thought. And they did, often. Why? Because they could, because something displeased them, because they were bored. Scylla's old eyes were haunted. "My ancestors lived on a world called Morav Prime. The Kelvari burned it because a Moravi diplomat spoke out of turn at a ceremony. 14 billion dead in a single afternoon." Danny stopped eating. That is what they were. Scylla sat back. Eventually, the remaining species formed a coalition. The war lasted 200 years. 90% of the coalition forces died, but in the end, the Kelvari were destroyed, every single one, or so we believed. Danny looked toward the outer wall, though he could not see the creature from here. It does not seem dangerous. A dying sun does not seem dangerous either until it explodes. Scylla shook her head. "You should have let it die." "I could not." "Why?" Danny thought about the question. He thought about his own life, about the times he had been desperate and alone, about the people who had helped him and the people who had walked past. "Because no one else was going to," he said finally. Scylla stared at him for a long moment. Then she stood and walked away without another word. The next morning, Danny found a crowd gathered near the outer wall. The outpost administrator, a Toraki named Brill, was standing at the front. He was a tall creature with purple skin and 4 arms, and right now all 4 of those arms were crossed in anger. "The human," Brill said when he saw Danny. "You will remove this thing from my outpost." Danny pushed through the crowd. The Kelvari was still lying in the same spot, but it looked better than yesterday. Its eyes were open and alert. "Remove it how?" Danny asked. "I do not care how. Kill it, drive it away, load it onto a ship. But it cannot stay here." A voice rose from the crowd. "We should kill it while it is weak." Other voices agreed. Danny saw weapons being drawn, saw the fear and rage on alien faces. "No," he said. The crowd went quiet. "No," Brill repeated. "It has done nothing wrong. It is just lying there. It is a Kelvari. It is hurt and tired and thirsty." Danny stepped between the crowd and the creature. "Leave it alone." Brill's 4 arms unfolded. "You would defend a monster that burned worlds." "I am defending a creature that has not burned anything since I found it." Danny did not move. "If it attacks someone, I will step aside. Until then, you go through me." The tension stretched. Danny was one human against 100 armed aliens. He knew how this math worked, but he did not move. Finally, Brill made a sound of disgust. "You have 3 days, human. After that, I will handle this myself." The crowd scattered slowly, though many cast dark looks at Danny and darker ones at the Kelvari. When they were alone, Danny sat down next to the creature. "You are brave," the voice said in his mind, "or stupid." "Probably both." Danny pulled out a container of protein paste he had saved from his meal. "Eat this." The Kelvari sniffed at the paste, then ate it carefully. "What is your name?" Danny asked. A pause. "Kira. I was called Kira long ago." "I am Danny." Danny, the name seemed strange in his mind, like Kira was tasting it. "Why do you help me, Danny? You know what my kind did." "I know what your kind did. I do not know what you did." Kira was silent for a long time. "I did nothing. I was young when the great burning happened, too young to fight, but I was old enough to watch, old enough to understand, and I did nothing to stop it." "That was 10,000 years ago." "Yes, I have been alone since then, hiding, running, hating myself." Kira's golden eyes met Danny's. "You are the first being who has shown me kindness in 3,000 years." Danny did not know what to say to that, so he just sat with the creature as the suns began to rise, keeping it company in the growing heat. In the distance, he could see ships arriving at the outpost. Word was spreading across the galaxy. Whatever came next, Danny knew his life would never be the same. 3 ships landed at the outpost within 2 days. 3 more followed. By the 3rd morning, the small trading post had become the most crowded place on Kesari 7. Danny watched the arrivals from his usual spot near the water station. Kira had moved closer to the buildings now, strong enough to walk but still too weak to fly. The creature stayed near Danny whenever possible, which made the other inhabitants extremely nervous. Scylla came to sit with Danny as the latest shuttle unloaded its passengers. "The Galactic Historical Preservation Society," she said, pointing at a group in white coats. "They want to study Kira like a museum piece." She pointed at another group, larger and angrier. "The descendants of the burned. Their ancestors lost worlds to the Kelvari. They want justice." The 3rd group was smaller, just 2 beings in expensive clothing with armed guards. "Private collectors. They want to add a living Kelvari to their menagerie." Danny felt sick. Kira is not a thing to be studied or owned. To them, Kira is exactly that. Scylla looked at him with something like pity. "You started this, Danny. Now you must see it through." The first confrontation came that afternoon. A representative from the descendants of the burned approached Danny with a formal document. "We demand the creature be turned over for trial," the representative said. It was a tall being with gray scales and black eyes. "The Kelvari committed genocide against 17 species. This one must answer for those crimes." Danny looked at the document. Kira was a child when those things happened. It did not participate. "It does not matter. It is a Kelvari, that is enough. Where I come from, we do not punish children for the crimes of their parents." The representative made a harsh sound. "Where you come from, your species nearly destroyed itself with nuclear weapons. Perhaps you are not the best judge of morality." Danny had no response to that. It was true after all. Kira spoke in his mind. "They will not stop. They have waited 10,000 years for this. Then we will make them understand that you are different." "Am I different?" There was genuine uncertainty in Kira's mental voice. "I watched my kind burn worlds. I did nothing. Is that not also a crime?" Before Danny could answer, something changed in the air. The crowd near the water station began to scatter. Danny heard screaming. A figure was moving through the chaos, fast and determined. It wore black armor and carried a weapon that glowed with energy. Its path led directly toward Kira. "An assassin." Danny moved without thinking. He threw himself between the assassin and Kira just as the weapon fired. The energy bolt hit him in the chest and sent him flying backward. Pain exploded through his body. He hit the ground hard and felt something crack. The world went fuzzy around the edges. Through the haze, Danny saw Kira rise. The creature's wings spread wide, torn as they were. Its golden eyes blazed with light. A sound came from its throat that shook the ground. The assassin raised their weapon again. Kira moved. Not to attack, not to kill. The creature swept one massive wing forward and created a barrier of golden light between itself and the assassin. The energy bolt hit the barrier and vanished. The assassin tried to run, but Kira's other wing came around and trapped them in a cage of light. No fire, no destruction, just containment. Then Kira turned to Danny. The creature moved quickly despite its injuries. It curled its massive body around Danny, shielding him from the crowd and the chaos. Danny felt warmth spreading from the creature, easing the pain in his chest. "You saved me," Kira said in his mind. "Why?" Danny coughed, blood came up. Seemed like the right thing to do. "You could have died. Still might." Kira's golden light intensified. Danny felt the warmth sink deeper, felt bones knitting back together, felt torn tissue healing. It was strange and uncomfortable, but the pain was fading. "What are you doing?" Danny whispered. "Repaying a debt." Kira's mental voice was strained. "I cannot heal completely, but I can keep you alive." Around them, the crowd had gone silent. Danny could see hundreds of faces staring at the scene. A Kelvari, the monster from their nightmares, was curled protectively around a human, using its power not to destroy, but to heal. Scylla stepped forward from the crowd. Her old face was wet with tears. "In 10,000 years," she said quietly, "no one has ever seen a Kelvari protect another being." Danny reached up and touched Kira's feathered neck. The creature trembled under his hand. "First time for everything," Danny said. The assassin was taken into custody. The representatives from all three factions watched in confused silence. Nothing in their plans had prepared them for this. Danny lay in the curve of Kira's body as the suns began to set. His chest still hurt, but he would live. "What happens now?" he asked. "I do not know," Kira admitted, "but I know that I will not let them hurt you. Whatever comes, we face it together." Danny closed his eyes. He had come to this outpost with nothing. Now he had something worth protecting. He supposed that was how the best stories started. Danny woke in the medical bay with bandages around his chest and a headache that felt like a ship had landed on his skull. Kira was pressed against the wall nearby, too large for the small room but refusing to leave. "You should rest," Kira said in his mind. "I have been resting." Danny sat up slowly. "How long was I out?" 2 days. The Galactic Council has become involved. They are sending a tribunal." Danny's headache got worse. "A tribunal for what?" "To decide my fate." The tribunal arrived 1 week later. Representatives from 42 species gathered in the largest building on the outpost, which was still barely big enough to hold them all. Kira waited outside, too large to fit through the doors. Danny stood at the center of the room, facing beings from across the galaxy. He had never felt smaller. "You are the human who found the Kelvari?" asked the lead tribunal member, a being made of flowing silver liquid. "Yes. And you wish to speak on its behalf?" "Kira will only communicate through me, so yes, I will speak for it." Murmurs ran through the crowd, the silver being raised a tendril for silence. "The Kelvari are responsible for the destruction of 1,217 inhabited worlds. 17 species were rendered extinct. 90% of the Galactic Coalition died fighting them." The silver being's voice was cold. "What possible defense can you offer?" Danny had prepared for this. Scylla had spent days teaching him law and history, helping him build an argument. But standing here, facing the weight of all that death, the words seemed small. He spoke anyway. "Kira is not the Kelvari Empire. Kira is one being who was a child when those things happened. It did not burn any worlds. It did not kill anyone. Its only crime was being born into a species that did terrible things. Guilt by association is not our concern," said a representative from the descendants of the burned. "The Kelvari must be held accountable." "Then hold the Kelvari accountable. But the Kelvari are gone. Kira is the only one left, and Kira never participated in any of it." "How do we know that?" Danny paused. "Ask it." The room went quiet. Through the walls, Kira's mental voice reached everyone. "I did watch," Kira said. I was young, but not too young to understand. I saw my elders burn worlds. I saw them laugh as civilizations died. I did not participate, but I did not resist. I was afraid. I was a coward. The room remained silent. When the war came, I fled. I hid while my kind were hunted. For 3,000 years, I wandered alone, hating myself for surviving. I wanted to die, but I was too afraid for even that. Danny felt the weight of those words. 3,000 years of guilt, 3,000 years of isolation. I do not ask for forgiveness, Kira continued. I know what my kind did cannot be forgiven. I only ask for the chance to make amends. I have power, I have knowledge. Let me use what time I have left to help repair what was broken. The silver being turned to Danny. And if we decide the Kelvari must die, what then? Danny looked toward the wall where Kira waited outside. Then Kira will accept it. It told me so. And will you accept it? Danny thought about the question. He thought about his own species, about the wars and genocides that filled human history, about the generations that had struggled to move beyond the sins of their ancestors. Humans have done terrible things, he said finally. We burned our own world. We killed millions of our own kind over differences that seem meaningless now, but we also learned. We grew. We became better than we were. He faced the tribunal directly. If you kill Kira for what the Kelvari did 10,000 years ago, you teach the galaxy that redemption is impossible, that a species can never escape its past. That guilt is inherited forever. Danny's voice was steady. Is that the lesson you want to send? The tribunal deliberated for 3 days. Danny slept in the medical bay, Kira still pressed against the wall. Neither of them spoke much. On the third night, Danny went outside and found Kira watching the stars. What will you do if they decide against you? Danny asked. Accept it, Kira's mental voice was calm. I have lived too long already. That is giving up. No, that is accepting consequences. Kira turned to look at Danny. But I want you to know something. Whatever happens tomorrow, these past weeks have been the best of my very long life. Danny sat down next to the massive creature. Why? Because for the first time in 3,000 years, I have not been alone. I have had a friend. Kira's golden eye reflected the starlight. That is more than I deserve. Danny leaned against Kira's warm feathers. Everyone deserves a friend. Even monsters. Especially monsters, Danny smiled tiredly. How else are they supposed to become something better? Kira was quiet for a long time. Then very softly the creature began to hum. It was an old melody, something from before the burning when the Kelvari were young and the galaxy was still full of wonder. Danny listened until he fell asleep. Tomorrow the verdict would come, but tonight they had the stars. The ships came without warning. Dozens of them, all bearing human markings, all landing at the outpost in the days before the verdict. Danny watched from the medical bay window as humans poured out of the vessels. They were not soldiers or officials. They were ordinary people, miners with rough hands, haulers with worn clothing, teachers, shopkeepers, farmers. What is happening? Kira asked. I have no idea. Scylla found Danny an hour later. Her old face was a mixture of confusion and wonder. They came for you, she said. For you and the Kelvari. Danny walked outside. The humans had gathered near Kira, but they kept a respectful distance. When they saw Danny, a cheer went up. A woman approached him. She was middle-aged, with gray hair and the calloused hands of someone who worked hard for a living. We heard the story, she said. A human gave water to a dying monster. The monster protected him. She smiled. That is the most human story I have heard in years. How did you hear about it? Word travels fast when humans do something decent. The woman looked at Kira. We wanted to help. We brought supplies, credits, whatever we could gather. Danny did not know what to say. He had been alone for so long, scraping by on the edges of society. Now hundreds of his own kind had crossed the galaxy just because they heard he did. Something kind. Why, he finally asked. The woman laughed. Because that is what we do. Humans root for the underdog, always have. She patted his shoulder. Besides, who does not love a good redemption story? The other species at the outpost watched the human gathering with visible unease. The aliens whispered among themselves, trying to understand. Danny found Scylla standing apart from the crowd. This makes no sense, she said. The Kelvari could kill every human here with a thought. Why are they not afraid? Danny thought about how to explain it. Humans spent most of our history killing each other. We had wars that lasted generations. We invented weapons that could destroy our entire planet. That does not explain why you are not afraid. We learned that fear does not solve anything. It just makes more enemies. Danny watched as a young human child approached Kira with a drawing. The child held it up proudly. Kira lowered its massive head to look, and the child giggled with delight. We learned that people can change, Danny continued. Whole societies can change. It takes time and effort and forgiveness, but it happens. We have seen it happen. Scylla shook her head slowly. 10,000 years, and no other species has learned that lesson. Maybe you needed us to show you. The human presence changed something at the outpost. Other species began to watch the interactions between humans and Kira. They saw no fear, no hostility. They saw a human woman bring Kira a blanket, even though the creature did not need warmth. They saw human children singing songs for the ancient being. They saw ordinary people treating a monster like it was just another lost soul that needed kindness. Slowly, very slowly, other beings began to approach. A young Moravi walked up to Kira with trembling legs. Danny watched, ready to intervene, but the Moravi just stood there. My grandmother told me stories about your kind, the Moravi said. She made me promise to hate you forever. Kira said nothing, but she also told me that hate only creates more hate. The Moravi took a deep breath. I do not forgive you, I cannot, but I am willing to believe that you are not the same as the ones who hurt my people. Danny saw something shift in Kira's golden eyes, something that might have been hope. The night before the verdict, Danny found Kira looking at the stars again. I never understood humans, Kira admitted. When my kind studied the young species of the galaxy, we thought you would destroy yourselves before you reached the stars. We almost did, several times. But you did not, and now you are here teaching ancient beings how to forgive. Kira's mental voice held wonder. Perhaps that is why you survived when so many others did not. Danny sat down in his usual spot. We are not special, we just refuse to give up. That is what makes you special. Kira turned to look at him. In 10,000 years, I never met a species that could forgive the unforgivable. Your people do it like it is nothing. It is not nothing, it is hard, it hurts. Danny smiled tiredly. But we do it anyway because the alternative is worse. Kira was quiet for a long time. The stars wheeled overhead, ancient and indifferent. If I am allowed to live, Kira said finally, I want to learn from your people. I want to understand how you carry so much pain and still choose kindness. Danny leaned against Kira's feathered side. First, you have to survive tomorrow. Yes, Kira's warmth surrounded him. But tonight, I think I understand something I never did before. What is that? Why you gave me water that first day. Kira's mental voice was soft. It was not charity, it was not pity, it was simply who you are. Danny closed his eyes. Maybe. No, maybe. It was kindness without expectation, the rarest thing in the universe. Kira's wing curled around Danny protectively. Whatever happens tomorrow, thank you for teaching me that such things exist. Danny fell asleep wrapped in golden feathers, surrounded by his own people, facing the unknown. Tomorrow would decide everything. But tonight there was peace. The tribunal chamber was silent as the silver being rose to deliver the verdict. Danny stood at the center, hands steady at his sides. Outside, Kira waited with hundreds of humans and a growing number of other species. This tribunal has deliberated on a matter without precedent, the silver being announced. The fate of the last Kelvari. Danny held his breath. We have heard the testimony. We have reviewed the evidence. We have considered the arguments from all parties. The silver being paused. The vote was close, but a decision has been reached. The room seemed to shrink around Danny. The Kelvari known as Kira is permitted to live. Sound erupted outside, cheering, crying, a mixture of joy and disbelief. Danny felt his knees weaken but forced himself to stay standing. However, the silver being continued, conditions apply. The Kelvari must remain under the supervision of a designated guardian at all times. It may never use its powers for destruction, and it must dedicate its remaining years to restoration efforts for worlds still scarred by the actions of its kind. The silver being looked directly at Danny. The tribunal requires a guardian willing to accept responsibility for this creature. The consequences of failure would be severe. Is there anyone willing to take this burden? Danny raised his hand before his mind could catch up with his body. Silence fell again. You understand what this means? The silver being asked. If the Kelvari harms anyone, you will be held accountable. Danny nodded. I understand. Why would you accept such a risk? Danny thought about all the ways he could answer. He could talk about justice, about redemption, about the lessons of human history. But in the end, only one truth mattered. I have been taking care of strays my whole life, he said. This one is just bigger than most. A ripple of something went through the tribunal. It might have been amusement, it might have been respect. The silver being inclined its head. Then it is done. The human Danny Reeves is designated as guardian to the Kelvari known as Kira. May this decision bring healing rather than harm. Danny walked outside into the light. Kira was there, surrounded by humans and a scattering of other species. The creature's golden eyes found Danny immediately. It is over, Kira asked. It is over, you get to live. Kira was silent for a moment. Then the creature lowered its massive head until its beak touched Danny's shoulder, gentle as a whisper. Thank you, Kira said. I do not have words sufficient to express what this means. Then do not use words, show them, show everyone. Danny reached up and touched Kira's feathered neck. Be the Kelvari they never expected. 3 months later, Danny stood on the bridge of his new ship. It was not fancy, but it was large enough to carry a Kelvari passenger and sturdy enough to reach the far corners of the galaxy. The human community had donated the credits. The Historical Preservation Society had provided the technical support. Even some representatives from the descendants of the burned had contributed, though they never spoke of it publicly. Their first destination was a world called Surith 4. It had been burned by the Kelvari 8,000 years ago. Nothing had grown there since. When they arrived, Danny and Kira walked across the dead soil together. The ground was gray ash as far as the eye could see. No plants, no water, no life of any kind. Kira stood at the center of the wasteland and spread its wings. Golden light began to flow from the creature, sinking into the earth, spreading outward in rippling waves. Danny watched as something impossible happened. Green shoots pushed through the ash. Grass appeared, then flowers, then the tiny beginnings of trees. Water seeped up from deep underground, forming streams that cut paths through the new growth. It would take years to fully restore the world, maybe decades, but the process had begun. How does it feel? Danny asked. Strange, Kira admitted. I spent 3,000 years destroying myself with guilt. Now I use that same power to create. The creature looked at Danny. It feels like breathing after holding my breath for centuries. They stayed on Surith 4 for 2 weeks, helping the restoration spread. Then they moved on to the next dead world and the next. Word traveled ahead of them. The Kelvari was healing what its kind had broken. The human who gave it water was by its side. Years passed. The story of Danny and Kira became legend. Spacers told it in bars across the galaxy. Parents told it to children at bedtime. It became a symbol of something the galaxy had forgotten was possible. On a warm evening many years later, Danny sat on a hill overlooking a forest that had not existed when he first came to this world. His hair was gray now, his movements slower, but his eyes still held the same stubborn light. Kira settled beside him, massive and warm and content. "Humans have a saying," Danny said. "No act of kindness, no matter how small, is ever wasted." "I know that saying. You have told me many times." Kira's mental voice held affection. "What made you think of it now?" Danny looked at the forest, at the sky, at the creature beside him. He thought about a cup of water and a dying stranger, about choices that seemed small but changed everything. "Just remembering where we started," he said. Kira hummed softly. "Perhaps humans need a new saying." "What is that?" "Even the oldest legends can be given new endings." Danny smiled and leaned against his friend's golden feathers. The suns were setting, painting the sky in colors that had not been seen on this world for 10,000 years. It was, he thought, a very good ending, and also a very good beginning.